Today is the third Yeirtzeit of my late brother Daniel Eliyahu ben Yaakov Raphael, and in this Devar Torah I'd like to dedicate it to him. It should be an aliyah for his neshama. We know from the Talmud that when we speak of the virtues of a person who's passed away, especially on his Yeirtzeit, when we do mitzvot and good deeds in their name, it elevates their soul in the next world, and that's the purpose of this short shiur today on his third Yeirtzeit. Also, saying Kaddish for somebody who has passed away elevates their soul in the higher worlds, and as we said, doing good deeds and mitzvot and giving tzedakah, giving charity in their name also helps their cause in the higher worlds. There is also this idea that one who has children, when his children do good deeds after his lifetime, it also elevates the parents' neshama, the parents' soul. This is spoken about in great detail in a book called The Neshama Should Have an Aliyah. And this then begs the question, for one who has passed away, who does not have children, this begs the question, how is their neshama, how is their soul elevated in the higher worlds if they don't have children themselves? So the answer is when one does a good deed, when one gives charity, when one speaks words of Torah in that person's name, that serves to elevate their soul. And in fact, there was a famous rabbi from back in the 18th century, Rabbi Shimshon Nachmani, who had a child that was 8 years old when he passed away. So the child passed away when he was 8 years old, and this rabbi never had any other children to survive him. And he wrote a book called Zera Shimshon. And before he passed away, he published this book. And he said, I don't have any children now in this world to do good deeds and help me in the next world. My son, he said, passed away already when he was 8. And he said, I would like to ask people to learn my work of Torah, learn my book, my explanation on the Chumash. And he said, that will help me, that will elevate my neshama in the next world, in the higher worlds. Specifically because, especially so, because he said he didn't have any children. So if we bring this in the case of Daniel Eliyahu, my brother, Zichrono Livracha, as we know, he did not have children. He wasn't married, and he was sadly and suddenly taken away from us at the age of 34. So with this idea in mind, it's down to us to help him to elevate his soul in the higher worlds. And so, being his Yeirtzeit today, I'm going to just discuss one or two Torah ideas, which I hope will be Le'ilui Neshamato, which will elevate his soul and help him. And the more people that listen to this, and the more people that pass this on, this should be a great aliyah for his neshama. Daniel is, of course, sorely missed by so many of his friends. He had a very, very large, close circle of friends. And he had many students as well who spoke very, very highly of him, which is not always the case when one speaks of their maths teacher. But those of us that were there at the Levaya, at the funeral, saw that there was such a diverse crowd from the religious world, from the school he taught in, and of course his very, very large, very dear group of friends. It was a very, very moving funeral to attend for myself as well as his brother. One of the things that came to light during that funeral was when his head teacher, where he taught in Yesodei HaTorah in Stanford, Rabbi Selig, spoke about one or two of the deeds that Daniel did in secret. When he spoke at length that Daniel was supporting a student, and this was done completely secretly, it was done completely anonymously. There was a student in his school that was having some social issues, behavioral problems, and it was suggested that the school make an appeal to either the parent body or to a group of teachers if they could raise the funds to help this boy. And Daniel came forward and he spoke to the head teacher privately, and he said, it's okay, I teach this boy, I'll cover it all. And it amounted to some £3,600 over the course of a full year. And he did this entirely anonymously. He told the head teacher, nobody is to know about this, I'm just giving the funds to you completely anonymously. And the Gemara, the Talmud, speaks about one who gives charity in secret. It is such a great quality to have. It is such a great virtue to have, to give tzedakah, to help people, whether financially or through your time. It is such a great thing to do this anonymously, without pomp and ceremony, without fanfare, without publicity. That it's such a powerful character trait to have. The Talmud in Bava Batra, that's the Gemara in Bava Batra, on page 9b says, one who performs charitable acts in secret pacifies heavenly anger. And we know that Daniel did many acts of chesed, many acts of kindness, many acts of charity, and he did it in secret. Now this of course begs the question, if such an action is so powerful and it pacifies heavenly anger, the most obvious question that all of us are now thinking to ask is then, how could Daniel have passed away so suddenly, completely unexpectedly, at the tender age of 34? He had his whole life ahead of him. How could it be that if he had this quality of giving charity in secret, and the Torah tells us, the Gemara, the Talmud tells us, one who gives charity in secret pacifies heavenly anger, how could it be then he was suddenly taken away? One would think on the face of it that, somebody who passed away, perhaps heaven is angry with that person. Heaven forbid. This is the obvious question that springs to mind. Of course, we don't understand why God causes things to happen in this world. Certainly not always. Sometimes we may get an insight as to why something has occurred. And in this case, of course, we don't know the ways of Hashem, but our Torah teaches us, even though we can't see it, Hashem is kind and compassionate and full of mercy, and everything He does is for the ultimate good. Again, even though we may not be able to see it. I want to share a story that I read in a book called Living Emunah by Rabbi David Asher. And the book is entitled Living Emunah, Living a Life of Serenity Through Faith. And in this book, I don't have it in front of me, so I can't quote the page number, but in this book there is a story of a couple in France who were childless for many, many years. They were married, and they were having trouble conceiving and having a child. And what they decided to do was to raise money for a communal mikveh and have it in the back of their home. For many, many years they struggled to raise the funds, and eventually after a number of years they were successful. They finally raised the amount needed, and they were able to have a mikveh built at the back of their home. At around the same time, the family were then blessed with a child, a baby boy. And the boy, when he was a toddler, at the age of 2, somehow made it to the back of the house, in the room where this mikveh was. And very sadly, the child was unattended to for whatever reason, and ended up falling into this mikveh, into this pool of water, and sadly drowned. The parents obviously were absolutely devastated, absolutely broken. For years and years they were yearning to have their own child, and they worked tirelessly to raise money for a mikveh, which we see they accomplished. But now it seems that all of their efforts, that they were doing things for the sake of heaven. They raised a mikveh, obviously, in order to serve the community, so the community can keep the laws of mikveh. And obviously they yearned to have a child, which is a very big mitzvah in the Torah. And it seems on the face of it that all of this hard work, this dedication, this self-sacrifice they had for many years, trying to build a mikveh and then finally having a child, has ended in complete and utter disaster, with the loss of that child through the very mikveh that they had worked so tirelessly to build. And this couple, as one can well imagine, just could not accept this. They were absolutely broken and devastated beyond words. They just could not go on with their lives. And this went on for a number of months. And then all of a sudden, the parents, I'm not sure if it was the father or the mother, as I say, you can go and look at the story in the book Living Emunah by Rabbi David Asher. Some months after this tragedy, the boy came to the parents, again I'm not sure if it's the mother or father, in a dream. And the boy said, "Stop. You are preventing me from going higher in the upper worlds. You are stopping me climbing the ladder of spirituality. You are causing my soul in the upper worlds anguish. You're causing me pain. because you are refusing to accept the will of Hashem. You're refusing to accept the will of God. Of course, it's difficult, but by the fact that you're not accepting what God has done is causing me pain and anguish. And the boy told them in a dream, in a previous life. Of course, in Judaism, we actually do believe in reincarnation. It's spoken about a lot in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah, in the deeper mystical works. But this boy told his parents that in a previous Gilgul, in a previous reincarnation, he was murdered, I think, by the Cossacks in Eastern Europe, and he suffered a horrible, horrible death. He was murdered in all the pogroms against the Jewish people, and he did not have a proper Jewish burial. And as one may know, that when a Jewish person passes away, before he's buried, the Chevra Kadisha put the body into a mikveh, or they certainly use buckets, they use water and immerse the body in water, or they pour water on the body in order to spiritually cleanse the body, very similar to what a mikveh does. And it just so happens that in this previous life, this boy was murdered, and he did not receive a proper Jewish burial. His body was not immersed in a mikveh. He did not have the waters poured over him to cleanse him and clean him spiritually before he was buried. And this boy in the next life came down and was born to his parents, who built a mikveh. And the fact that he drowned in the mikveh, that was actually his what we call a tikkun in Hebrew, or that was his spiritual rectification, that he passed away in this mikveh, and that completed the burial process that he should have had the first time round when he was murdered in Eastern Europe in his previous reincarnation. And the fact that the parents were refusing to accept the way he died, they were refusing to accept the will of God, it was causing him anguish. And again, this is a very, very deep story, very, very deep ideas and profound concepts, which I imagine not everyone will be able to digest so easily. Nevertheless, we are known as the people of the book, the Jewish people, and these concepts and ideas are brought about in our Torah, in the Zohar, the Kabbalah, and these ideas are also talked about in the Talmud, in the Gemara. And these ideas are part of our faith. The Jewish people have survived and endured and prospered through several millennia. Again, these ideas are very deep and profound, and sure, not all of us will be able to digest them first time round, but nevertheless, these are ideas that, we should be aware of. So if we bring this story to Daniel, we don't know, my dear brother Daniel Eliyahu, Daniel Aaron, we don't know why he passed away. He was taken so suddenly. We don't know God's plan. However, we do know ultimately that God does everything with mercy and compassion, even though we can't see it. And of course we can't see it. However, it will be a help to his neshama from the story we've just illustrated, that if we accept the will of God, what Hashem has caused to happen 3 years ago, on this very day 3 years ago, by accepting Hashem's will, by accepting that God chose to take Daniel from this world, that in itself will help his neshama, that in itself will help his soul in the celestial worlds. And through this Davar Torah, through many of us listening to it and passing it on to friends and family, and this should also be a big aliyah for his neshama. We miss him dearly, of course, and we wish he was with us today. However, Hashem runs the world, God runs the world, and as difficult as it is, we have to accept what God does, and in doing so, we hope that it should elevate the neshama of Achi, my brother, Daniel Eliyahu ben Avi Mori. Thank you for listening. There are other ideas on this channel, lessons from the Gemara, which discuss the idea of giving tzedakah, and there are various other subjects which you may find of interest, so feel free to browse through the other videos, and all of these videos should be an aliyah for my dear brother Daniel Eliyahu.